Hi, this is Marcelie Hancock with the Internet Keep Safe Coalition, and I'm excited to introduce you to Officer Holly Lawrence today. Holly currently works in schools and has seen a great deal in the Santa Clara area. So please, Holly, tell us about your experience with students and what we can do to be more helpful for them.
First, I would encourage anybody to reach out to their local police department and definitely make contact with school resource officers or any officer that can be around and be helpful, because there's so many questions and problems that come up in the schools that do require a police officer's response. And even if it doesn't and you're not sure, I think it's always great. We're there for a resource for a school as well. So please reach out and ask if you need help with anything. There's so many gray areas and so many problems coming up with the cyberbullying and sexting and all of those issues, and we are familiar with them from a legal standpoint, so we're happy to help.
So how important is it that we have a positive relationship with the law officers in our area?
I think it's almost a critical relationship, because there are so many things where schools are mandatory reporters, and then there's things with the digital world that is so unfamiliar to a lot of parents and to a lot of school staff themselves. So we're there to definitely help navigate and help you determine if there's been criminal activity or not, whether it's online or in person.
So when we're working with the youth in the digital environment, we're always hoping that it never happens at our school. So when something really challenging happens at our school, how can Generation Safe and the flowchart help us make decisions of when to bring in the police?
The flowchart, the Generation Safe flowchart is an amazing tool for schools to use, because it walks you through step by step and when you really should call. I would encourage anybody to take a really serious look at that and definitely use that for your basic framework. In addition to that, again, if you have questions, any question from a school, we're happy to help. But that flowchart really does narrow it down and make it a lot easier. It also gives the questions that law enforcement's going to want answered, that it will give you the idea of starting an investigation and the questions that we're going to need and we're going to ask. So if you have that ready, it makes it so much easier for me to do my job, and it's extremely helpful.
So we always hope we never have to ask the hard questions, but when you're interviewing and you're trying to gather the evidence and you're trying to establish intent, what can we do to make sure we're getting the best information? Give us some ideas on that interview process.
I think when you're interviewing a child, I think if you just talk to them and just try to find the story and just try to figure out what's been going on and what they're thinking, and from their perspective, try to, what are they thinking, what motivated them, why did this happen, what started this incident, and then where did it go to after this, and who knows about it, and how many people are involved. I think if you just start a conversation and just act as an interested party, that really kind of helps, and then it starts the flow.
So if I'm listening and I'm listening for the story, how important it is that I notice things like the student was scared or worried or felt betrayed or angry. How important is it that I notice the emotions?
In addition to the typical who, what, when, where, how, you definitely want to find out what that person is thinking and what they're feeling, because that really does affect the outcome of the investigation or the interview. So if you can figure out emotions along with the facts and what's going on with the student, fear, if they felt uncomfortable, if they felt anything like that, it's really important to establish that early on and try to get that documented and written down.
So we hear that when law officers come in, they do their investigation. There's not a lot about that investigation they can share with the principal or the other administrators at the school. So how, if a school's gathering information and the law officers are gathering information, what do you recommend for the principals or the people who are right on site? What's a good way to work together? What do you recommend for them?
A lot of times the principal and the officer, not always, but a lot of times the school official and an officer are talking together with a student. So if we're hearing the same conversation and I'm documenting things, if they're documenting things as well, it is very consistent and it should be pretty, even across the board. And I think they need to keep their notes and keep their records because they're going to have their own issues that from a criminal standpoint aren't going to exist. So they have to deal more with the parents. They have to deal with the fallout. They have to deal with, future references and what happens, and potentially court. So you want to make sure you have your notes and your all your ducks in a row so that you're prepared and ready.
So in Generation Safe, we created the investigative forms to help us ask the right questions. How important is it that we fill those out and we make sure they're all taken care of?
It's huge. If you can fill those out, the guesswork is sort of taken care of for you. So if you can just follow that format, it's going to really get you on track. And then you're going to have all of your documentation, all of your notes, all of your information there. And it's going to be very easy to follow, and it's going to be done almost for you.
So you've had experience talking to victims and perpetrators in hard situations. So if we're going to have a relationship with that victim or with the perpetrator, what can we do to help them feel more cared for and included so that they're less defensive and so they feel like we're on their side? As educators, we want all of our students to feel like we care about them. What can we do to make that an easier, warmer experience?
I think if you can really speak with somebody and if you can be empathetic, then it goes a long way with the victim and even with the suspect. I mean, sometimes people know they've made a mistake, and I'm not here to hammer in that they really did bad. I'm here to we got to take care of a problem. So let's deal with it. Let's get this done. And if it's from a victim's perception or standpoint, then if you're that empathetic and you're there to listen and help the situation and they feel that from you, I think it makes a big difference than if you're just a talking head and very stiff and robotic. I think if you really can be there and you can feel for them, it works well it goes a long way with everybody.
Well, I've heard from some of the principals that are familiar with you and you're so welcome in their school. What have you done to create this relationship of trust with your principals, and what can you say to other principals who want to have someone who's a friend on the law enforcement team?
I think it's so special working with the schools and in there, and I think if you just start the dialogue and then if you start getting ideas on how, if you understand their policies and if you understand their procedures and they understand a little bit about mine, I think if you start there and then you start building that relationship, you really get a trusting, amazing partnership that goes a long way. And we really, as law enforcement officers, need to rely on the school and what's been going on with these children that involved in the incident. And we rely on their experience with them because they have a lot more knowledge on what's been going on and how this child behaves than we do. We only step in at critical moments during these incidences. So we really need to work together to get that desired outcome, whatever it may be.
So how important is it that this happens, this relationship and this dialogue, before there's an incident?
It's critical to get this before, because if I know what's going on in the school and they know me and they trust me, we're already going to have sort of an idea of how we work together, and we're already going to have an idea of where each person is coming from. So if you can build that relationship before an incident happens, it's much more comfortable for everybody involved, because a lot of times there is an intimidation factor with bringing in law enforcement, and I would hope that it's not there if you have that strong partnership, because we do work together on so many different occasions that it's critical to start building that relationship before something big happens, so you already are familiar with how to work together.
So let's say I have someone at my school as a student and they don't feel very comfortable talking to law officers and they don't feel very comfortable talking to me. How can I help them?
That is a common scenario that we do face in law enforcement and even in just schools talking with students. In Generation Safe, there is the insights that you can go to learn how to start that dialogue and the ideas that you can use to take with you into that reluctant student.
So if you had anything to say to people working in the schools, from your perspective, what would be the most important thing to share?
I think if you listen to your inner voice in doing the right thing, and if there's something that is uncomfortable or makes your hairs on the back of your neck stand up, then you need to visit it and find out what's going on and listen to that instinct and determine what the best course of action is.
Holly, thank you so much for coming. There's so many little things that happen in the digital environment. It's very hard to know when to call the police, how are the law officers, and how do we engage in a positive way, and how do we develop a relationship before there's an incident. So thank you so much for coming out and helping us walk through some of these tricky topics.
No, it's truly my pleasure. I love doing it.